Hey everyone, Arthur Fantastic here, aka the Bishonen Ronin, coming back to you for part 2 of responding to Gil Alcocer, talking about pulling guard, and as I entitled it, sitting guard is disingenuous. We're going to continue on in this video, but so far he's been giving a lot of arguments that are simply just from his jiu-jitsu centric view of grappling, as if all grappling is jiu-jitsu, as if wrestling isn't a part of grappling, as if standing portion is just unrelated to the ground version, as if we all just crawl on the ground all the time and that's how we get in fights. In addition, he also suddenly makes this jiu-jitsu supremacy argument, which is really out of left field, but ultimately the underlying motive, in my opinion, that is driving this entire conversation is that his idea of what jiu-jitsu is pulling guard. It's just guard play. And that's a very limited view of what jiu-jitsu and grappling is altogether. Thinking that it's just this ground version and being able to avoid all the other portions because, well, this particular specialized part of grappling, the submissions and groundwork that involve the submissions, is an insane jump in logic. It's non sequitur. It doesn't actually answer any problems that are contained in the arguments of the opposing side having to do with the pulling or sitting of guard. So ultimately, it's important that we always address what we're doing in the sports arena with the acknowledgement of how the rules actually play out in the actual competition of things. We don't acknowledge it, then we just have bullshit. I think this is an interesting conversation because parallel to this, we have the conversations in the martial arts sphere about the rules going on in judo. Oh, should we be able to grab legs? And then we can also look at the never really growing numbers of the wrestling audience, and we see the very small niche number of fans that are willing to view grappling events. Okay, so these are relevant because we can't just talk about the sport without also talking about the business side. We can't talk about the sport without talking about the martial art. We can't talk about martial arts without also applying it to general combat and what is in competition of your art will foment how they view combat in general. Okay, they're preparing for their next combat situation with the limited rule set that they're in, and they're going to prepare for that, and that's what they're going to be really good at. But if you aren't prepared for real combat, or at least let's say a more realistic form of combat, then you're just preparing for a very niche sport game. You're actually not a martial artist. You're just a sports athlete that plays a very technical game. And if that's what you want, that's valid. That's totally valid, but you're not allowed to say that you're a martial artist, right? You have to say, I'm just a sports athlete and I'm just trying to play this intricate strategic game, okay? And that's fine, like I said, but it also goes to say, as we spoke to Logic earlier, about sitting down and literally moving away from your opponent and waiting for them to chase you and pass you and engage you. You then concede the aggression. You concede engaging. And very few of the people that are arguing against pulling guard are arguing against people pulling into sumigashi. pulling into tomonagi, pulling a person down and immediately sweeping them with butterfly sweeps, which you could also say sumigashi, whatever. It's a hook inside the leg. And there's a number of technical aspects of pulling guard that a person can control that person a significant amount and off using it hits the ground but uses immediate off balance to immediately wrestle up. And I'm going to be doing a video on a black and white video of a person doing this who's a catch wrestler pulling guard. We'll talk about that in that video. Look out for it. Holler at your boy Arthur Fantastic for that knowledge. But we're going to go back into the video. We're going back into the video. We're going to get this first little clip back out of the way. It's that like a last little thing that he says there. I'm going to address it and we can move it further into the video, hopefully.
What did they do? They learned jujitsu. Their wrestling didn't win. The wrestling helped them win after they learned some basic jujitsu.
If you inverted that argument and said, well, the Gracies learned wrestling. I mean, the Gracies jiu-jitsu helped them, but it was wrestling that helped them win the match. It's just absurd. People had to learn how to wrestle, and they also had to learn how to do submissions. If that was particularly the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu way, or the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu way, as they like to say, then that was the way they took. But there's also the Luta Livre way, okay? There's a lot of Luta Livre fighters from Brazil, and they don't get the credit they deserve because they don't have the money that the Gracies had to get their marketing up in place. But there's still Luta Livre fighters still fighting to this day. And they have varying levels of success. And that's also a catch wrestling based style. There is other types of fighting styles, sambo, judo, catch wrestling, that are grappling styles that have submissions and standing takedowns and mat work. And they have also have had success to varying degrees, as we've touched on. I'll let them continue here, but I just think that it just ends up being a whiff at an attempt at an argument. We are all going to learn each other's things. That's how getting better and dealing with things that we've dealt with, by then gaming those things in our strategies, not gaming it as in like, oh, I'm going to just avoid it by jumping out of the ring or something, you know what I mean? Which I guess that would be an interesting thing, like a professional wrestling. I go off on tangents here. Let me just let this guy continue. He's about to talk about some more of the same thing, and I'm just going to have to shut it down again.
And what happened in those early MMA fights with someone like Royce Gracie couldn't take their opponent down? Did they lose? No. What happened was he either got taken down or he pulled guard and then he submitted them, because the takedown is not that big of a part of our sport. And
I call bullshit. Starting with his fight with Dan Severn. First off, you could say the back and forth with Ken Shamrock over his fights with Royce, him taking him to a draw, but we all knew that Ken Shamrock whooped his ass in that fight. The crack started showing with the Dan Severn fight. He basically tooled him for most of the time there, and then I think, if I remember correctly, Dan Severn like gassed or something. And when Royce comes from behind after being beaten to a pulp on the bottom here, it's because he's a tough athlete. Don't get that confused with your art. Then, oh, this is my art is superior. He was a superior athlete. He had a superior mindset. I trained with Royce Gracie. I trained at a school under one of his students. So, and I've trained with him at seminars. So I'm not against Royce Gracie. It's just factually wrong. Okay? When we get to the fights with Sakuraba, he can't take down Sakuraba, literally. And Sakuraba ends on top. He's pulling guard even on the ground with his legs up in a supine guard against Kazushi Sakuraba, and it doesn't work out very well. He loses that fight, okay? He loses against Matt Hughes. You could say that's possibly past his prime, but it's also because he can't get the takedown against Matt Hughes. He's not going to get on top of Matt Hughes. If it's on top for a moment, that would be for a pretty good time, because a short amount of time on top of Matt Hughes is pretty incredible, because Matt Hughes is such an incredible athlete and also a great wrestler, and he also had some grappling training, submission grappling training. When we discuss these historic inaccuracies, we have to, no, you're wrong. That's exactly what happened when he wasn't able to take them down and stay on top and control them. He did lose the matches. That's the whole point. I mean, if you actually watch those fights. So, like I said, bullshit.
With all these new rules that they're putting in place to encourage wrestling in the takedown aspect, we've been robbed of seeing some world-class jiu-jitsu between two world-class jiu-jitsu athletes, where they've been forced to wrestle each other, where they are not world-class wrestlers. The biggest example to me was the ADCC matches with Hoffa and Cobrinha. Those are two of the best ever at jiu-jitsu, and we had to watch them try to wrestle each other and take each other down for like 20 minutes. And yeah, they're pretty good at wrestling. I'm not trying to argue that, but are they world-class wrestlers? Would they go into an elite Olympic-level wrestling competition and do well? No, they would get smoked. That's not their sport. So why are we watching them do that when they're much lower level at that? Why aren't we getting to enjoy the show of watching these elite-level submission grapplers grapple for the submission? They were forced to stay on their feet and try to wrestle each other, where neither one had an advantage, because if one pulled guard, the other person could stall out from the top and win by the penalty that the person got for pulling guard.
There's a number of things going on in this clip that are both kind of funny and ironic, but also missing the entire point of what happened between Rafa and Cobrinha. Okay, first off, Cobrinha and Rafa both had a wrestling-based game. They were game on the feet. They're winning scrambles, and they had a more aggressive, attacking, wrestling type of stand-up style. Okay, they're passing, everything like that. The reason why we were robbed of seeing a technical jiu-jitsu grappling exchange is because Cobrinha and Rafa did not want to concede the bottom position, and they would rather battle over a takedown to decide who gets on top than to concede outright the top position, because they respected the other person's game that much. And so they may not be the top, collegiate wrestlers of all time, but they do have good wrestling, and seeing that exchange, it could have been better. There could be more ways to force them to keep going if there was more stalling calls, and there's a lot to discuss in the rule sets. That's what this response series is going to be attached to, is my rule set discussion series. But none of that is acknowledging that these exchanges are high level. They do have high level wrestling. You acknowledge that, but you're not acknowledging that these are high level wrestling exchanges and that they are game opponents. And you are now favoring your own opinion of what you like, which is the ground submission mat work, over the standing portion. But they respected the standing portion. They didn't want to concede the bottom position. They were willing to wrestle it out. It's you're looking over what's happening, and you're not paying attention to what they're doing and why they're doing it. They're just doing it because just the rules. That could be it. you could say that they're willing, that's 100% it. But if they're really willing to be getting right into the submission grappling portion, as you say, why wouldn't they concede it? Do you think that they don't have those same thoughts? Could you consider that maybe that the wrestling portion was there because they respected one another's game and they were wrestling it out for the top position, and that is a factor of why we're going for the takedown and why the takedown is so important.
And if the takedown is so important and it means so much, why are we changing the rules? Why can't it just work itself out? If it's that big of a deal and it's that important, then it would be happening. We wouldn't have to change the rules and make it illegal to pull guard.
Okay, first off, Gil, no one made it illegal. Okay, people are still pulling guard and have always pulled guard in ADC and all these other things. What they've done is made rules that acknowledge that you've conceded the position, like you've conceded the position that you would have given up if someone taking you down. You've, in essence, taken yourself down, and so that the rules were arranged in such a way to acknowledge that isn't a knock on the rule makers. It's trying to have it be reflective of what things count as, because sometimes, whether it by to incentivize the athlete to go and compete, like to try to finish the fight, or as a way to track who wins in case there is no emphatic winner. So it goes to some type of scoring system or judging system. There are rules in place so that we can more easily understand how and why we're competing the way that we're competing. Now, when you're saying changing the rules, do you mean making rules that you don't like? Because if you were just to let things figure themselves out, then you would not have rules where you couldn't punch or kick or elbow or not eye gouge or knee in the balls, so on and so forth, right? You would just let that go. Or do we have a sport, right, that does have rules, and some people are gaming those rules, so we're deciding to create more rules so people that are trying to game it or want to approach it disingenuously, as I would like to assert, they're not coming in it in a genuine way. I think that that's up to the rule sanctioning bodies, and I think that they are trying to incentivize athletes to go for the finish, as I said, but also it's fucking boring to watch just hour-long submission-only matches that only end when somebody gets submitted, okay? And there's a lot of stalling, and, I respect riding time and all this other stuff, and, what might be considered stalling, if for some people might be, grinding the person out and making them carry your weight. But if we're going past 15, 30 minutes, guys, who has time to watch each match? 30 minutes, fucking an hour long for each match. It's not an entertaining prospect. It's like, oh, okay, I have to. All right, we'll see how long this goes. You know what I mean? This is something I'll have on the background while I'm doing something else. You know what I mean? If that, okay? Because at this point, I'm not buying or watching matches like that unless someone says in a breakdown that it was a really amazing match. Then I'll go find it and the breakdown of it. Sometimes they put it out for free on YouTube shortly after it happening. So the better matches end up just being able to be viewed anyway. So a lot of these events aren't getting the eyes of even like hardcore fans like myself, because it's just, why? It's not going to be exciting. It's not going to be something that I want to spend several hours watching.
There's no logic to this. It's just mostly dumb people parroting what they heard someone else say. And because, like, it looks cooler, it looks more masculine, it looks tougher to, like, walk away from a guy, like, turn your back to him and, like, wave him on to stand up. Like, you're not doing anything. You're avoiding the fight is what you're doing. And
Once again, we have Gil treating the subject matter very dismissively and being very dismissive of the other side's position. Oh, there's no logic to it. I mean, we've already discussed it at this point for about an hour, the logic behind why sitting guard is disingenuous. But he's going to discuss some of the points in a straw man-like way at the end of his video, which we'll get to as we get to it. But once again, I just need to point out that he just approaches it with a "fuck you." There's no logic to it. There's no logic to it. That's an overstatement. You're saying something beyond what is necessary to solidify your position because you recognize the weakness of your position. There is no structure around it other than, well, I do jiu-jitsu and that's what I think it is. You know what I mean? That's we're trying to get there, aren't we? Yeah, you're trying to get there. You're trying to get to the guard. You're trying to get to the ground how you want. Maybe I want a headlock. Maybe I just want to get your back. Maybe I want to take you down with a single leg and pass from there instead of not just pulling you into my guard. Other people have their own strategies. We have to recognize some of those strategies, which I assert just like, oh, I'm holding your hand, I sit on the ground, and then I go, I pulled guard with the grip. And we have to recognize that that's not really an actual way of pulling guard. Rather, it's very lazy. He asserts, it's this man. Yeah, it looks cool and masculine to walk away and wave a person up. First off, I didn't know masculine in terms of martial arts was a insult. But that being said, I want to address the idea that the waving up of a person does nothing. It's avoiding the fight. I honestly find this to be an incredible amount of projection. To say that walking backwards, turning your back, giving them space to stand up. See, this is what's called gentlemanly rules. We are allowing fairly for a person to get back to a neutral position so that we can push the contest forward. If a person in most any other fucking sport, if they go to the ground and they cannot get up or do not get up, okay, because they're hurt, they are ruled out and unable to contend or contest or fight or whatever the fuck they're doing anymore. If they've injured themselves, they've lost. Okay, that's it. But in this one scenario, which some people are finding like this is a incredibly ridiculous, disingenuous scenario where we just allow people to sit to their ass and then butt scoot on the ground. It's okay because you think that is the core of your art. The core of your art is not going to your ass and butt scooting. It's not taking grips and sitting on the ground either. Okay, that isn't the core of the art. Okay, the guard, while central to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, whichever you like, is a large part of the grappling system, but it is not the entirety of the system. Okay? And it's mind-blowing to be so willfully dense, to not understand why, when people are calling this disingenuous like myself, you can look at it from an objective view and see, wow, like that looks lazy. If a person was playing basketball and it was one-on-one, and they're playing one-on-one, and they're shooting around, and then one person got really tired and sat on the ground, took a knee. Like, that's the end of the game. The other person's going to wait for them. That's the end. You keep playing the game, And if he doesn't fucking meet the bell, come up to scratch, as you would call it in old England, right? The English way, come up, make scratch from the times of Jack Brompton and the boxing rules before the Queensberry rules. Yeah, right. Anyway, fisticuffs, wrestling. They had wrestling, in fact, under the Jack Brompton rules. Okay, and then when a person went to the ground, it was ruled, okay, the end of a round, and you start again once you throw somebody to the ground, because when you get to a ground, like, it's going to be a tussle, maybe sometimes. If one person knows wrestling, then the other person is going to get pinned, and it's going to be a bad time. And if it's going to be a technical standoff, which is what we're hoping for in the modern sport of sports grappling, that's the next phase of what would be called grappling. It is not a separate sport. It is not a separate thing. So, just to sum up the whole up to scratch basketball analogy and how it applies to this tremendous amount of projection, the idea is, in Jack Brompton's rules for boxing, okay, there would be a line. You would scratch it in the ground. Not all boxing matches were held in a fucking ring. You would make a square in the ground, you'd scratch it in the ground, and then you make a line. And you'd have like 60 seconds after a round, whether it was by takedown or you got knocked down or whatever the heck. And after, you would get 60 seconds to rest, and then you have to make it to that little line, scratched in the ground. Make it up to scratch. If you didn't, you lost. If you don't answer the bell in boxing or MMA, you lose, because it's ridiculous that you get that extra time to rest. You get that extra time to collect yourself. Just an extra couple seconds is fucking a tremendous help to athletes at that level who have these, they've been testing their VO2 max and being able to, calm their heart rate, and their body has been building up to this moment through athletic training, and they already had that athletic ability, so it wasn't something that was just happening out of nowhere. So there's a reason why that rule's in place too, because not just of the competitors, rather, it's also in place because it is, that person doesn't answer the bell, they're not going to fight anymore. You're forcing somebody that can't even stand up and get to the line to fight. So it's not only for fairness, but it's also for their protection. And it's applying that to now the basketball analogy of some dude playing basketball one-on-one with you and taking a knee. You're like, check up the fucking ball, let's go, next point. You don't get the fucking, I'm tired. Yeah, you will. That's why I'm a better athlete and I'm about to beat you. You know what I mean? You don't get to just fucking sit there and gather your strength before we play the next point. That's not how basketball works, okay? Not one-on-one. You get quarters in a fucking basketball game, but you ain't playing to, 7, 11, or 21 points. You're playing for a time, okay? There's no timers when you're playing at a court on the street. This is fucking ridiculous that I have to completely explain this analogy, but you have to play the game. You challenge somebody 1v1. Why do you then get to do that in grappling? You get to, I'm going to take a knee and you have to engage me, especially in a situation where there's a tournament and you're going against multiple people. And so, you could be tired in the third match, and instead of like competing, you just sit down. Like, what is the incentive to go and finish when people are arguing, why can't I sit down? People watch this, aside from, which I'll discuss in a moment, betting, viewership is the second most important part of keeping a sport alive and growing it. And if it's a niche sport and no one's fucking watching, and the people that do, even hardcore fans, as I said in the first video, but a lot of casuals look at this and they're like, what is this? Why are you sitting down? Like, I'm trying to watch people scrap. Go for it. There's $1 million on the line in the case of CJI. Like, there's $10,000 on the line in the case of ADCC. Like, that's life-changing money in both cases. For most people, $10,000 might not change your life, but it might make a good impact. $1 million is changing someone's life. And you're going to sit down for it? And then you're going to say, oh, I was engaging. I was aggressive. I didn't concede anything. You sat down. You can't have it both ways. You want to be allowed to sit down? Fine. But you have to agree that you're conceding the standing position. You're not letting the other person contend with you standing. You're making everybody watch. You just sit down, and now that other person has to engage you. Even if you're butt scooting, they could outrun you in any real world situation. They are in choosing and being forced by the rules to engage you there. Okay? Otherwise, they just kick you in the fucking face, kick your legs, walk around you, and keep doing that. You know what I mean? You don't have the mobility that a person on standing up does. Okay? On your butt. Now, I clarify this every time, but just in case he tries to respond to me in a way that is like just as disingenuous as his guard pulling agenda, which is the problem, is that I'm specifically talking about people who grip, sit down, let go, I'm sitting guard, not people who pull half guard or pull full guard, literally pulling that person down into it. Okay, gripping them up. See, I've got my gable, my butterfly, my S. Okay, don't do this for the noobs. This will break your fingers. No one's fucking mad about that. No one's mad if somebody pulls them into sumigeshi, which is like basically a butterfly sweep right into a sumigeshi, tomonagi. Tomonagi. I just think that this guy just wants to be allowed to sit down, okay? And I have chosen so far not to cut deep, and I'm just attacking his arguments. I'll leave it at that. Why would you want that to be a part of your sport? Sitting down. Because as a martial artist who is training martial arts not only to compete in some sport, but to defend myself and the people around me, to fight my attacker off, not to sit down and wait for them to get on top of me. Fucking ridiculous. Like, I get there and I get a loss of words because it's just such a ridiculous, like, do you want Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to not have any takedowns? Oh, no, I mean, I don't learn. It's not that you don't have to learn takedowns. But, like, get out of here, man. So you can beg the question about the logic all you want, but the only person that's being illogical is the person trying to separate stand-up grappling, aka wrestling, or judo, no-gi judo, what you want to call it. There's nothing separating that from the ground portion of grappling. You want to call it jiu-jitsu, you want to call it whatever, mat wrestling, grappling as just a general term. Those are one and the same. And just coming in and just like trying to like crawl on your butt toward a person is an insane prospect to like just continuously allow if we are asking people to, like, which is important to understand that the only reason why large sports makes money is because there's gambling on it. And if people see a sport where outwardly looks like where people are lazy and not getting up and going after the finish, no one's going to invest or gamble on that. No one wants to really watch that from the stands. Like, oh, he's playing that game where he's on his butt and the other person needs to engage with him. No, you're giving up engaging, you're sitting to your butt. Once again, you're the person who is not trying to fight. You're avoiding the stand-up portion of the fight, the stand-up fight. Literally. How is this person avoiding anything? He wants to go to the ground. He just doesn't want to be forced by you to get in my guard. It's fucking ridiculous. And he, as a gentleman, allows you to stand up on your own accord in a gentlemanly way so you can continue the contest that's being viewed by people.
And when it comes to the athletes who are fighting to make this the case where they're wrestling and you can't pull guard, there's a reason they're doing this. It's because they have a higher skill set in the takedown area. Probably their guard passing isn't as good as they want it to be or should be to be a good guard. So they want those 2 points and they want those advantages and penalties against the other guy for pulling guard.
A simple cursory glance at the current sports grappling landscape will immediately debunk that, because I'll use the same example that I've been using so far, Craig Jones, CJI. That's run by CJI, that's Craig Jones Invitational. Craig Jones, he's not a wrestler, he's not a high-level wrestler of any kind. In fact, most of the time I see him pulling guard. Maybe he's got an Uchimata Horai Goshi a couple times in competition. But most of his stuff is sneaky, what's this called? Deceptive movement. But he's become a well-rounded grappler now. He's not afraid of passing any guards. And neither is B Team, which is also probably what involved in the rulemaking process for the CJI competition. I think that's a really dismissive and like unsubstantiated claim. The idea that, for instance, CGI is doing it only because they can't pass guard or they're better at takedowns is fucking ridiculous. None of them are D1 wrestlers. I think Nicky Rod is a D3 wrestler. And they're penalizing supine guard. They're penalizing several things. You can't be just playing these ridiculous positions. And even they, in my opinion, was very lenient in terms of what they were calling and using in terms of stalling calls, etc. in competition. I think they were really lenient on what they could have called to push the action even more, to see more action in the matches that we did see. Now, if we're going to talk about ADCC, which has been the standard in submission grappling, it's a submission grappling competition or a submission wrestling competition, not a jiu-jitsu competition. They invited several types of disciplines of grappling, several grappling disciplines. There you go. To the original events, there was many jiu-jitsu terra, and we have also grapplers like Josh Barnett, you know what I mean, up there. We've got some, if I'm not mistaken, some Olympic wrestlers early on, but they haven't been around or invited for a long time to any of the major tournaments until CJI, which started inviting major Division I wrestlers again. Okay, and they're making money. I appreciate that, especially for college athletes. They need the money, but you know, what the fuck do I know? They might be making bank these days. Going further into this breakdown, I'm not seeing what he's trying to understand the opposite side. And just to conclude on my point on ADCC, the takedown, like not pulling guard, is only in the finals because they want those matches to be the most exciting, by the way. And they allow a large portion of their lead-up matches to have a period of time which no points are taken, so you can go for it. It also encourages the taking of turtle to avoid the pass, which is inevitably going to lead to two standing athletes who will then wrestle, which is something that's it just visually makes sense. A lot of times, I think that those exchanges, those scraps, are some of the most exciting when people are really like, I don't want them to take my back, and they're going for it. I want the takedown now. I don't want to be on bottom and have to be the person who is turtling, which is something that you will see in most of the catch wrestling based systems, whether it be folk style, which we call amateur catch as can wrestling, or freestyle, which is also from the same thing. Go to France, you look up what a wrestler's name is, a catchier, and like what wrestling is called, it's called catch. And you'll see that people are avoiding the pin, so they go belly down, and then they start building up a base. We've discussed this many times on this channel, specifically in the video that I may put up here for your viewing pleasure, and we'll link also below. That all being said, we'll move on into this, but they've always had these types of moving the points toward this type of grappling because it's more exciting, it's more action-packed, it's causing people to go for it more, and it's more natural form of combat when you're trying to get up and not just allow somebody who would in any other situation just start punch you in the face. Okay, yes, again, the early UFCs had a Royce Gracie dominate, but as time went on and people became more savvy where to put their weight and that they could just punch a person who's grabbing onto them, it became more and more of a hard prospect for Jitsu Terra. Not that it became hard for Royce, who had only a couple fights and then he retired, not like the athletes of today, but he was also fighting in the gyms and whatever number of fights before those were recorded, who knows. Needless to say, once you get punched in the face, you start changing your mind of wanting to be on the bottom. And it was never the course of action for the Gracies in competition to just pull guard when somebody can punch you or stomp you in the face. Moving on. I just have to hammer that home. That he's appealing to that, but that's not even a true statement. That, they just pull guard in competition because jiu-jitsu. What?
I'm not saying within submission grappling and jiu-jitsu that we shouldn't learn any takedowns. But if you've taken the time to develop an area of your game to an elite level that a world-class grappler cannot pass your guard, why should you be penalized from using that skill set that you've worked for? It makes no sense.
I'm not saying you have to learn any takedowns. Gulp. But, the qualifier sentence already reveals the disingenuous nature of the following statement after but. But if I learn to specialize in this really one fucking thing, why should I be penalized? I'm fucking amazing at finger locks. I'm fucking amazing. I've only been to one competition that allows them. The Billy Robinson tournament in 2008, which is a catch wrestling tournament, allows finger locks, small joint manipulation. I find it really prejudiced that all these other jiu-jitsu competitions and submission grappling competitions don't allow small joint manipulations. Oh, woe is me. Why am I so fucking oppressed? Why am I penalized for wanting to use these finger locks? I think it's just more begging the question. It's more willful obliviousness. Why are you penalized? You are conceding standing. You're literally saying it. I'm just going to concede the standing. I should learn takedowns, but can't I just skip that because I specialize in this other portion? Yeah, okay, fine. But you're going to concede the standing as you're saying yourself, and therefore that's going to be reflected in the points. Why the fuck is that so fucking complicated? Can someone fucking tell me? I'm going crazy here. He can't be this dense. He's just literally repeatedly begging the question.
Why should a wrestler have that advantage? I don't get it. I don't understand why a wrestler deserves an advantage to work a takedown when they're coming into a submission grappling competition. We're doing a sports competition, so in sport, in competition, there's aspects of strategy. So does it make sense for an elite level jiu-jitsu guy to go out there and wrestle an elite wrestler? No, it makes zero sense. Why take that risk of the injury, getting hurt, or even just purely embarrassment? But why take that chance when you could literally technically pull guard and get the match going right to a spot where you're more advantaged?
He's begging the question, but he's not actually giving any reasons for his side to be legitimate or justified in the way that it plays the game, the rules, how it interacts with other people, how it contends, how it competes. Instead, we're going to then once again say, well, why can't I be a super specialist on the ground and just avoid the stand-up grappling? Okay, well, let me ask you a question. Why can't you be a full martial artist instead of a specialist and avoid a large portion of what you say that you're representing? Like, because you keep saying submission grappling and then intimating the idea that that is separate from stand-up grappling, the wrestling portion, the scrambles, the number of wrestling and judo concepts of pin that are being applied in at least a general sense in the ground portion, but are obviously present in a significantly more in the stand-up portion. Why are you able to skip it? Why are you asking that? Because that's obviously what you're asking. Why can't I just skip it? I mean, if you're going to be worried about things like injury, which is not a significant contributor to these takedowns aren't a considerable factor in injury. Some people do get injured doing takedowns, but people get injured doing a lot of things. It doesn't mean that you stop doing it. You don't stop throwing punches. You don't stop throwing kicks. You don't stop doing doubles. You don't stop doing guard passes. You don't stop doing chokes and joint manipulations. You've got to continue doing them because they're all part of one thing, which is grappling. And you might be able to partition and being like, oh, well, this is there, this is there, even though there's a lot of transitionary movement between both of them. Set that concept to the side. They are one fucking thing, and you're just asking, why can't I just skip that portion? Why are you allowed to skip it? Why are you allowed to play that game? Because the rules say it? Well, if we change the rules, are you going to keep complaining? Oh, I'm just not going to compete there because I just can't sit on my ass guard. Why? Why is that so important that you're able to sit on your ass? Why is that so important? I'm not sure that you're understanding that the stand-up wrestling portion can lead to you getting guard, or even better, of already passed and they're on top because you took them down in the correct way. I'm not sure that there is a lot of logic where he's coming from. Gil, what are you talking about? This guy is complaining that you have to learn wrestling. Well, wrestlers didn't complain in his little argument that they had to learn anti-jiu-jitsu or learn jiu-jitsu or some other type of submission grappling game. Okay? Well, why do you have to complain that you gotta learn some fucking judo or wrestling? Fucking get to it, boy. What the fuck are you doing? Anyway, that concludes this portion of the video. Birdemic. I as we've said many times before on this channel, if you like it, comment. If you want to discuss, subscribe. We've got other videos on this channel as well, other videos on this playlist this video is a part of. We discuss a lot of different things. We discuss more than just the pulling of the guard. We're discussing the rule sets as a whole so that we can make it more palpable and genuine in terms of combat for it to be a better sport. To be a bigger sport, more people got to want to watch. It's as fucking as simple as that. and no one wants to watch certain things. People keep saying it, and you're like, oh well, it's like people who say that they don't like the new Star Wars movie, and they're like, oh, you're just fucking misogynist. You're just a misogynist. Oh, you don't like the people pulling guard? You're just a wrestler. Or something. You're just like bad at passing guard. It's the same it's the same ideology. It's the same type of mentality of like, oh, you're just some bad thing in my in my mind, and so I don't have to listen to you. Anyway, thank y'all for watching all the way through. As I always say, stay up, stay vigilant, stay locked and loaded. Shalom, shalom, peace in y'all.